thanks to all of you to join this session, this discussion about these predatory journals at this late hour in the afternoon on the first day of Ramadan. So I was just a few minutes ago, I was texting Hafiz that will there be any participants today, because we need to actually hurry for Ramadan Bazaar. So I was wondering how many of us will be here. So nevertheless, I see quite a few of you are interested to join and listen to this discussion. Hopefully, it will be a fruitful and productive discussion for all of us. So let me share my slide with you first. You can see my slides, right?
Yes, Prof. We can see it very clear.
Great. Now you see that I did not start with the title of the talk or anything, which is normally being done. Instead of that, I have used a snapshot of my email box, Gmail account, and it is, if you can notice it, that it is actually from the trash box. And looking at all those bold, mark of this email, you can see that I have not read them. Before reading any of those emails, I basically send them to the trash. And you can also see that all of those emails in this screenshot is coming from all on the same date, March 17. And I have highlighted 3 of them, right, with this red box, as you can see. I'm not sure if I can use pointer here. Okay, here. So I have used these, red boxes to highlight 3 emails. One of them is claiming that they have a very high impact factor. Second one is highlighting that they can publish very fast and we need to pay very less. And third one is telling us that the list of the papers, they are very, highly cited. They're published in their journal. So I believe that many of you receive this kind of email. And this is a very, to me, is a very clear indication that these journals are predatory journals. So I immediately put them in my trash. I do not spend any minutes behind them. So today our talk will be about this. But when we wanted to discuss about it, basically I gave this title of the talk, that responsible research to escape traps of predatory journal. The reason I gave this title is because somewhere in 18 March, Dr. Hafiz sent me a WhatsApp message. And then he asked me that if I can organize this talk covering these 2 objectives. One is importance of responsible research. And the second one is that how can we prevent young researchers from publishing with predatory journals. These are the 2 things. So in the beginning, I thought that how do I connect them? Because, they are 2 different things. Responsible research is one thing, and then predatory journal is another, very different issue. So how do I connect them? So to get the connection, basically, I came up with that title that I just now showed. So whatever the title, I will definitely try to highlight these 2 objectives. And to do that, I shall first talk about a little bit about this responsible research. And, this responsible research is something I shall try to tell you that, or try to convince you that these responsible research may help us to escape from these predatory journals publishing. I think, that if you look at these 2 terms, responsible and research, you shall get, very concrete definition of them in different sources. For example, responsible means it's a kind of obligation in our job or obligatory roles that we play to do something and with a certain controlled environment, and we care for something or somebody. So this is defined as responsible. And research is often defined as a systematic investigation of materials and then sources in nature and so on, in order to establish facts and find a new conclusions. So this is called as a research. So these are two words. One is responsible, another research, and they have very concrete definition, as you can see there. At the same time, I think many of you know me, especially those who listened to my talk in the past. You might have noticed that I like to create acronyms. So this is why I also created acronyms for the word responsible, RES, RESPON, and so on. At the same time, I also created an acronym for research. To me, if we can do something, or if our act reflects any of those or all of those attributes, then it can be considered as a responsible. Similarly, if our investigation or systematic investigation, if it reflects these attributes like rational, empirical, sensitive, advanced, and so on, then we can define it as a research. In other words, if we want to do anything which we are to define as a responsible research, it must reflect all those attributes I try to highlight in these acronyms. You may not, be able to remember all of them, but I can guarantee you that in the back of your mind, whenever you do things in terms of research, basically most of those attributes are actually you are considering it. It exists in your mind. Now, responsible research basically starts with a novel idea. That's what I think, and I shall tell you why. Novel idea is something. It can be defined in a very precise manner, but the interpretation of the word novel idea can be subjective. As I was, briefed a bit earlier, that most of the participants for this discussion are from the postgraduate student. So I thought I want to share with you what does it mean with the novel idea. So to begin with this definition or understanding about the novel idea, I put it into two different dimensions. One is at the bottom, known, another is at the top, is novel. So now you can see that whatever is known, it is not novel. That is why they are in the opposite direction. And between these two dimensions, known and novel, the factor which works is actually time. Because whatever, the factor which is actually differentiate between known and novel is time. The reason is that whatever we do not know today or at this moment, if someone comes up with that idea now or in future, or prove it with some kind of evidence, then it will be considered novel because it is not known yet. But the moment it is known, for example, today we know it, we came to know about that, tomorrow it will not be novel anymore. So the main issue for me to define anything, whether it is novel or not, is it depends on whether we already know it or not. I can give you an example. If you can see it at the bottom of this slide, there is a box. I gave a hint, which is drug X inhibit protein synthesis of E. coli. For instance, we know this issue that drug X basically can inhibit E. coli through its protein synthetic mechanism. So if we know it, then if anyone wants to replicate these results, whether it is in Malaysia or in England or anywhere else, it will not be novel anymore because someone somewhere already have discovered it. But if we look at this particular example, the drug X inhibits protein synthesis of salmonella. Now, if we come up with this idea that can drug X inhibit protein synthesis of salmonella, which is not known yet, because what we know is that it can inhibit protein synthesis of E. coli, but it was not known in salmonella. Now, can we consider this observation or this idea as a novel? You can see that I put it in somewhere in the gray area. The reason is that whether or not this is novel, it can be subjective. Some people will say that this is novel because no one has ever discovered about this salmonella. So that is why it is novel. But some people can come up with the conclusion that this is not novel because salmonella and E. coli, they belong to the same group of bacteria, which is coliform bacteria. Therefore, you are using the same drug and you are targeting the same, biomechanical procedure, molecular mechanisms. So that is why this is not novel. Some people may argue on that. So therefore, this kind of idea or observation can be subjective in terms of its novelty. But if you look at these two examples, that whether or not drug X can inhibit DNA replication of E. coli, this could be considered as a novel because this is DNA replication, but what we know about the protein synthesis. So there's a big difference between it. So from idea perspective, from the observational perspective, this could be a very novel observation. Or you can say that, can I test drug Y on the protein synthesis of E. coli? This also could be considered as a novel idea because we are changing from drug X to drug Y. So anyway, you can see that to start with a responsible research, we have to start with a novel idea, which in a layman term, we can say it must be a very great idea. So to conduct this responsible research, or to start with the good research, quite some time ago, people have come up with these 9 core instructional areas, which basically falls into these 6 ethical standards. One is the scientific integrity. Second one is the collegiality and human welfare, animal welfare, institutional integrity, and social responsibility. So all those 9 instructional areas basically fall into these 6 ethical domain. Now, if you look at the scientific integrity, it basically refers to how we manage our data, how we manipulate, whether or not we manipulate our data, whether or not we want to share our data, and how do we claim our ownership for the data. So this actually comes under the scientific integrity. Collegiality, it covers a few things. For example, mentor-trainee responsibilities, such as supervisor or students supervisory relationship and so on. It also involves the responsible authorship, whether we are offering the individual the authorship who deserves it or who do not deserve it, and so on. So this is how all those 9 instructional core areas basically fall into these 6 ethical domain. And to start with a novel idea or a great idea, we must ensure that we have to conform with these ethical values or ethical domains to conduct the research. So now we can see that we have to do something which is not only great, but it has to be right as well. It means that it has to be novel. At the same time, it has to be right in terms of its ethical standard. The moment we are fighting between these right and great, then basically we are suffering from these 2 issues. One is ethical issues, another is the legal issues. The reason I show it in the 2 opposite directions is because in many aspects, in many research areas, especially in the modern time, we shall see that some of the things that we do in our laboratory or we want to do for research can be considered as illegal, but it is not ethical. One of the best example is that human cloning. So in some countries it is it may give some some kind of green signal that at least organ cloning is legal, but some other people will say no, this is not legal. This can be legal, but this is not ethical. Same goes with the stem cell research, that in some countries some aspect of stem cell research is considered legal, but it is not ethical. So now here I want to tell you that a responsible research is not only fit under the legal domain, but also must be fit under the ethical domain. Now, whenever we talk about this ethical or legal domain, then we come up with this question that why do we do research, right? Is it that we want to only, for the sake of knowledge, that we want to have new knowledge, or is it that we have some passion for science, that we love science, that is why we want to continue doing research, or is it meant for the mankind, that we want to do welfare of the human being? So that is why we are doing it. So to do something responsible, I believe that all these three points must be met. All these three criteria must be met. So the importance of this responsible research then should be covering these three core issue. One is that it must be able to decode the natural laws so that we can see, we can have new information, new knowledge. At the same time, those new knowledge and new information, if we want to apply it, it must benefit the mankind, so that people today or tomorrow or in future they will benefit from it. And at the same time, whenever we are conducting responsible research, we have to ensure that we are not doing anything wrong. For example, we do not claim the ownership of our data falsely, or we do not claim authorship in a false way. So altogether, the responsible research actually will bring us to the domain of worthwhile knowledge. Sorry? Oh, thank you. My wife is trying to take some photo. Anyway, now while we are talking about the legal and ethical, ethical issues, we also have to think about two other things. One is the misconduct and integrity. All right, what is misconduct? I shall share with you a number of examples on that later on. And what is integrity? As you can see that I have highlighted a definition of integrity here. It is mostly all about honesty. All right, how honest we are in terms of our adherence to the moral and ethical principles, in terms of our legal values, that how honest we are. That is all about integrity. And misconduct is just opposite to it. So that is why we often, there is often a fight between the integrity and misconduct. Again, you can see a kind of, acronym for integrity and acronym for misconduct. But whether or not integrity and misconduct will win, it will depend on two things. Number one is that open-minded approach, and number two is the professional standards. And I must tell you that these two things is not universal. Professional standard in Malaysia and in United Kingdom and in United States may be very different, or at least to some extent it might be different. Similarly, open-minded approach is also, it is not universally, cannot be acceptable or cannot be explained universally. But yet, the fact is that these two issues will ultimately lead to the conclusion that whether integrity will win over the misconduct or not. Because if we have our open mind, then we can explain that whether our result is manipulated, or whether we have done something irrational, or whether we have caused some kind of sabotage or plagiarized and so on. So these kind of things can be explained in terms of these two factors. That is why we call it a winning factor. Now, in next few slides, I shall try to show you some example of the scientific misconduct that are already widespread in the scientific community. This is a paper which was published somewhere in 1998, I think. And it was published in PNAS, and in 2012. This paper was published after 2012. And what they did is that they have checked the more than 2,000 biomedical and life science research articles which were retracted. And what they found is that many of them were retracted because of fraud or suspected fraud. It means that those papers were retracted because of the manipulation of the results. Some of them were retracted because of the plagiarism. It means that they were claiming the ownership of the work which was actually discovered or explained by somebody else. And the third category of the retraction was based on the duplication of the publication. It means that some people have the tendency that they publish the same material multiple times. Now, what is very interesting to see in this particular pie chart, that the papers which were retracted because of the fraud and suspected fraud, that almost 75% of those retracted papers come from 3 top countries. One is USA, and then second one is Germany, and third one is Japan. So this is very surprising that most of the fraud and suspected fraud are taking place in these very scientifically renowned countries like USA, Germany, and Japan. Now, this is another paper which actually highlighted another very annoying aspect. You shall see it in a while. This paper, which was published in 2012 in PLOS ONE, they have analyzed around 4,500 papers which were retracted between 1928 and 2011. And what they found is that half of these retracted paper, which is around 2,225 papers, belong to 15 prolific scientists of the world. So you can imagine that half of these retracted papers were written or authored in one or another way by 15 prolific scientists. And I'm sure that you know who are prolific scientists. Prolific scientist means those who are cited, thousands of times every year. Now, if you look at it, if you divide this number, 2,225 divided by 15, then it gives us 150. It means that each of those 15 prolific authors have 150 papers in their CV or in the database, which were actually retracted and which were basically retracted for fraud. So this is a very annoying situation for us. Now, this is another scenario of the scientific misconduct that you can see. It's a very specific example that you can see, that a paper which was published in Lancet somewhere in 1998, and it was retracted in 2004. But before it was retracted in 2004, it was already cited more than 750 times. What it means is that a paper which does not worth to remain in the scientific community, it was used by 750 scientists or scientific groups for their further works. Same goes with many other papers. So it means that a retracted paper or a paper with scientific misconduct is not only that paper itself, but it has a very very severe consequences in the scientific community for the future of the science. Now, plagiarism is another common factor. Excuse me for a while. Another common form of misconduct, and I know we all know that plagiarism is nothing but just copying people's work and then without attributing their authorship or ownership. And simply this is a dishonesty, and there are plenty of examples of this plagiarism in the world, in the scientific community. I'm not going to go into detail into that, but what is important for us, that if we want to do anything which we want to define as a responsible research, it must be free from plagiarism. All right. And the third very disturbing issue in this in the concern of responsible research is that authorship assignment. It has gone to the extent that this authorship issue has actually become like a disease. As you can see, that different journals, for example, Journal of American Medical Association, and journal like Scientific Engineering Ethics, and Journal of American Society of Information and Science and Technology, and there are plenty of other journals. They have already highlighted that how authorship problem has pervaded the scientific community, and it has pervaded to the extent that some people want to change the author definition of authorship, and then they want to say that we should not define ourselves as author anymore. We should actually coin a new term, which is contributor. So this is really a very annoying problem for many of us. This is a paper which again published in PLOS One, I believe, and then it was this paper have reported the analysis of more than 4,000 retracted papers. And if you can look at it more carefully, that you shall see that 20% of those retracted paper were retracted because of the scientific misconduct, but most importantly, about 50% of them were retracted because of the scientific publishing misconduct. And this publishing misconduct basically consists of plagiarism, duplication of publication, and authorship issues. So again, I'm coming back to the same conclusion that if we want to have something in the name of responsible research, we have to be very careful that we do not plagiarize, we do not duplicate our papers, or we do not assign anything which is called unethical authorship. So in summary, we can say that publishing papers with one or more forms of misconduct is nothing less than cheating. It is basically a very close to cheating, is because in cheating we get credits that we do not deserve. And if we have any form of misconduct, it also gives us the same scenario, that we get a credit that we do not deserve. And with that kind of credit, it means that with a plagiarism, with a fake authorship or fake results or false results, we increase our number of papers, which is basically a fake number. And with this number, we basically try to increase our reputation as a scientist. And in reality, this is nothing but a fake reputation. And to achieve this, we hunt for this fake reputation because we think that we need funding, we need fame, we need glory, and all those things are needed because we want to have a position. And to get these positions, we depend on publication. So everything comes in a same race, that our funding, our fame, our glory, our positions, and our publications all come into the same race. And unfortunately or fortunately for some people, that predatory journals are actually provide us the avenue to earn that fake reputation. So in other words, if we do anything which is irresponsible in terms of research, we have to depend on the predatory journals. But of course, unknowingly, we also sometimes become victim of these predatory journals. Now, the question is that, what is a predatory journal? There are a number of, way to define it, but one of the most common and popular way to define it is this, which I'm showing in this slide. It was published in 2019 in Nature, and this definition was proposed by a group of scientists, I think more than 35 scientists from different parts of the world. And what they did that is that they defined this predatory journal by those journals which have these following characteristics. Number one is that they have false or misleading information. It means that if you go to their website, you shall get some information, but mostly those are not accurate information. And most of them, they will not provide you the right editorial services, or the services that you need to publish your paper, for example, to prepare your galley proof and to copy editing and so on. At the same time, those journals also do not have a transparent editorial or a reviewing policy. You do not know who are reviewers and what is the reviewer policy. They do not have any specific guideline for it. It means that they lack transparency. And more interestingly, they use a very aggressive and indiscriminate solicitation practices. It means that you shall receive lots of emails every day or every week from them, and they will ask you to submit papers. They will sometimes quote some of your published paper, and they will say that we have seen your paper which is published in that particular journal, and it is very good paper. Why don't you publish a similar paper to our journal? So this kind of aggressive solicitation is a very important tool for these predatory journals. But the very problematic part is that there is no universal list of the predatory journals. It means that we can have several lists. Most common list, actually the earliest list is the Bell's list that we know, that he started this list somewhere in 1998, and then he started publishing the list of journals, and somewhere in 2011 he identified 18 publishers. In 2016 the list has grown to 923, and today it has about 1,300 or 1,300 publishers, and which covers nearly 3,000 individual journals. So this is about Bell's list, but this is not only the list about the predatory journals. There are some other journals. You can see, for example, predatoryjournals.com. You can also see some journals are listed by individual institutions, for example, Yale University or Harvard University, and so on. And on top of that, you shall also see another list, which is called Cabell's blacklist of predatory journals. Currently, their list actually is more than 12,000, which is almost half of these Bell's list. Now, since we have different lists of a predatory journal, there was an analysis, a research to see whether there is an overlapping or not. And they found that there are some overlapping. Some people identified that whether Bell's list or Cabell's list, they often identified as same common journals as a predatory journals. Now, if you go to those predatory journals, website, for example, this is a publisher which is called Novelty Journals, publisher.com. And if you go to that website, you shall see that they are telling you that they can publish your article in 1 day. So, as fast as in 24 hours. This is something very, attractive, that you can publish your paper in 1 day, while, it may take 2-3 months or even more than that to get a paper published in a good journal. That is why, I showed you this email list that I have, that, some people will say that you can publish very fast, but at the same time, they also will tell you that you do not need to pay too much. You can pay a very less amount of money and still you can get your paper published. Now, if you look at these high profile journals, for example, Nature Communications or Scientific Reports, these journals also have a very interesting way to promote their activities. It's not that promote their journal, but they promote their activities in a very transparent manner. They will also tell you that they will take a very short period of time to publish a paper. From submission to acceptance, it may take more or less 20 days. This is for Nature Communications, which has an impact factor of around 12. But if you notice that here its article processing cost is more than $5,500 US. Same goes with the Scientific Reports. It has a very high impact factor, close to 4, and it can publish your paper within around 20 days. And it has a article processing cost is around $2,000 US. Now, the difference between these predatory journals and these journals are that they publish fast, they ask money, but they have impact factor. But those predatory journals, they do not have actual impact factor, which is calculated by the Web of Science. But the common thing between these, predatory journals and those journals just now I showed you, Nature Communication and so on, both of them are open access journals. And open access journals always have these catch that they will tell you or tell us that if you publish it in an open access journal, it will be cited more. And if it is cited more, you have a more credit for it. So all predatory journals are like open access journals who are high profile. So that dilemma actually give us the question that how do we define a journal as a predatory? Is it because they want to publish first, very, very quickly, or is it because they publish any paper with or without any quality, or they're asking for a article processing cost or open access cost, which may seem not very rational or reasonable? So these three questions needs to be answered before you can actually publish, before you can escape a predatory journal. Now, there are a number of publications which already they publish it there, and these papers have identified some characteristics of predatory journals, which is very similar or close to the definition which was published by Nature, but a little bit elaborated. For example, we talk about the aggressive emails that we receive from them, and then we also talked about that they will accept paper without any transparent review process, and they can publish a paper which has a no quality or least quality, and they will charge for some kind of article processing cost, but for that cost they do not provide any editorial services or any peer review services and so on. And they will also utilize some kind of misleading metrics, for example, impact factor. If you recall from the email list that one of those journals that they claim that they have impact factor of 7 point something, you can imagine that a journal which has a real impact factor of 7, they do not have to ask me to submit a paper to their journal, because I shall be dying to publish a paper in a journal which has a impact factor above 5 and so on. So anyway, they also promise to publish a paper as soon as possible, very quickly, and we do not know the ownership of those journals. It means that if we go to their website, we do not know whether it is owned by a institution like Faculty of Dentistry own a journal like Annals of Dentistry and so on, or it is owned by a society. We do not know. We also sometimes do not know whether they have a very a renowned publisher like Elsevier, Springer, and so on. So the ownership is some kind of tricky for those predatory journals. And as I said, that they have a very very poor quality of copy editing and proofreading. You can really see it in their galley proof. I remember that receiving a paper submitted by my student, and the galley proof did not have the right references. Some of the references were even missing, so they did not even check for those things. But interestingly, many of those predatory journals can claim that they have the membership of these, committee of open publishing, committee of, I forgot the, sorry, committee for the ethics, I think, some kind of ethics committee. And then DOAJ means the Directory of Open Access Journal. So all those predatory journals basically claim a membership from these databases. So having all those characteristics and having those benefits from those predatory journals, I have a feeling that predatory journals in academia has a symbiotic relationship, has a mutualistic relationship. The reason is that some of us, we want to publish a paper because some institution somewhere in the world, they look at the number only. They do not see where our paper is published. And using that number, we can get our job, we can get our promotion, and so on. That is why we often, try to get involved with these predatory journals and publish our papers in it. So perhaps this is one of the reasons that this paper, which was published in Scientometrics, and it gives us a big blow to us, that country like Malaysia and in India has come to top of this list in terms of publishing papers in predatory journals. So Malaysia stands 4th and India stands 5th. And since this is a month of Ramadan, and I am sure that we have a lot of Muslim participants today, I can tell you that if you look at these top 20 countries who are publishing papers in the predatory journals, most of them are actually Muslim countries. If you look at them, Indonesia, Oman, Yemen, Nigeria, Sudan, Jordan, all of them are basically Muslim countries. And of course, Malaysia stands in the 4th position. So this is a very, very traumatic situation for many of us. We did not expect it because we have been thinking that we were publishing quality papers with the research grant that we're getting from our government and so on. but the scenario is not the as we expected. After that paper was published, that scenario was highlighted in newspapers. I'm just giving you some of the headlines. It was papers were published in Star, in Free Malaysia Times, and I also took the privilege to publish 2 articles in a new Straits Times. Recently, one of them was directly about the predatory journals, how it should be exposed. It is published there. And the other one, I covered the issue of predatory journals in terms of the value of publications and value of research. So now, the question is that why do we publish them? I tried to tell you the reason we publish is because we need the number. But there was a paper which was published in this Learned Publishing, published by Wiley, and what they did is that they have conducted a survey among 300 corresponding authors who published their papers in predatory journals. What they found is very interesting. They found that those authors who submitted and published their papers in predatory journals, they mentioned the reason they publish it is because they get the services they needed. It means that the services means that they wanted to publish their paper as soon as possible. So those predatory journals basically help them to do it. They don't have to wait for 6 months or 1 year. So that is why they prefer these predatory journals. Some authors they inform that the reasons they publish in the predatory journal is because the so-called Western journals or the quality journals, they would not accept their manuscript. Most of the time, especially from the Middle Eastern countries or Asian countries, their papers are rejected by the Western journals. That is their claim. And some authors, they have accepted and they have confessed the reason they have published in the predatory journals is because they are not well trained for writing the good papers. They do not know how to write it, and not only in terms of these, in terms of English, but also in terms of the research methodology. So they do not know what should be the good research methodology. And definitely, as I started this talk with the novelty of research. A good research starts from a novel research idea. And the fourth reason they have highlighted is that list of predatory journals are not universal. All right, this is a very interesting issue that I also highlighted, a couple of slides earlier, that we have a number of lists and it is not universal. Most interestingly, that we are concerned about those 300 journals which are enlisted in Scopus, a very prestigious databases, and we use the Scopus as a standard of quality. Number 5th is a very important issue, that publish or perish policy. All right, this is a policy. Many countries, many governments took the policy and they impose it on the academic institution or research institutions. And after this policy was taken, basically the publication frequency in a predatory journal has increased a lot. You may know that in Malaysian Ministry of Higher Education adopted the policy of publish and perish policy somewhere in 2014. So now, whatever the reason, what we want to do is that we want to have our promotion, we want to have our fame, or if we are a postgraduate student, we want to have our degree as soon as possible. Because for all those achievements, our time is limited. If you focus on postgraduate students like masters and PhD students, the scholarship is available only for a limited period of time. And within that period of time, they have to show a number of publications. Without that, their degree will not be given. So what they do is that they depend on publishing in the predatory journals. Similarly, some of us who joined the job, we want to get the promotion as soon as possible. And for promotion, we need more and more paper. And sometimes we fall into the trap that we publish in the predatory journals. And many of us unknowingly, actually, that we look for scientific career to become famous, a world famous scientist. All right, we want to write our name in the Hall of Fame, become a prolific scientist. And to become a prolific scientist, we need more and more paper, because more paper give us more citation, and more citation actually makes us prolific scientists. So we want all those things as soon as possible. Again, the easiest way to do it is the predatory journal. And it seems that we are always running a race against the time, is because, as I said, that our students they need to get the degree, a master's degree in 2 years, or PhD degree in 3 years time, whether or not their results are good enough, but their scholarship will be terminated. And we as a supervisor, we have the obligation of this, what is called as a GOTS, all right, a graduate on time. So everything has to be on time. But research does not work. Experiment most of the time does not work on time. That is why we are, running a race against the time, and the policymakers will never compromise with the timing. We have to finish our, degree, our research grant within the fixed time. If not, we could be, considered as a failure. So for that, we are running the race. And then we take the advantage of publishing our paper or research, whether it has a quality or not, in the predatory journal. Now, the interesting part is that if we look at ourselves, that why we want to do that, at the end, we want a job, we want a promotion. It's all about money. And the people who are providing this avenue, the publishers, they also do it for the sake of money. So publisher wants more money, researcher or lecturers or postgraduate students, they want to earn money, or they want to have more money. And at the same time, some of us, we want to become publishers to make money. So eventually, we all are in a cycle, or I call it as a Bermuda Triangle of these, predatory journal publications. It's between the publisher, researcher, and the editors. So to do that, we often cook results, we bake writing, and we serve anything. In other words, we basically manipulate results, or we fabricate results. We actually, bake writing means that we want to write as soon as possible. We do not give enough time so that our writing become mature. We must give enough time to write it correctly. So we follow the principle of baking, and then we serve anything. It means that whatever the result we have, we want to publish it. All right, I must share with you that when I worked in IIUM, I had a chance in 10 years time, I had a chance to supervise more than 50 undergraduate students, what they call as a final year project. But among those 50 final year projects, I managed to publish only 3 or 4 papers, not more than that. Most of the FYP results I even did not consider to publish, because I know those neither they can prove to be reproducible, nor they could be proven to be novel or authentic, and so on. So I did not take any attempt to publish any of those things. But at the same time, I know some of my colleagues in IIUM, whatever the FYP they have made a publications either in the predatory journal or as a chapter of a book. So this is what I call as a serve anything. So we have to, we have to be very careful that we should not cook results, or we should not bake writing, or we should not serve anything to avoid any form of predatory journals. And this is a very relevant thing that we may take into our notes, that if you look at Newton, a very famous scientist, but he was very reluctant to publish. People had to force him. His colleagues need to push him to publish his findings or his theories or observations. He was very reluctant. But if you look at this guy, Urey, he published every 4 days. Every 4 days he published one paper for 10 years. This is how many papers that he published. I wonder how many papers of those published papers are authentic or are being cited. And if you look at these 20 researchers worldwide, who are considered as a prolific scientist, each of them, they publish one paper in every 11 days. So every 11 days they publish a paper, and that happened somewhere in 1980s. So this is a publication trend. Now, this is a graph that we published recently in the journal called Accountability in Research. What we showed here is that this is a graph of number of publications of an individual author. So what happens is that an individual author, they start their career, let's say somewhere in 1975, and during that time they publish, let's say, 2 or 3 papers every year. And along the line, down the line, 25 or 30 years later, they will publish 200 papers every year. So they start their career 2 or 3 papers a year, but they reach a peak of publication 200 papers every year. This data was actually taken from Scopus, and I have, if you look at it, these are taken from 2 different fields, one from the biochemistry, another from the physics. I did not give the specific name, I just give the name as a B1, B2, but each of them basically refer to one individual prolific scientist. So with this data, what I'm trying to tell you is that to what extent we actually are hunting to get more name and fame or promotion and so on as a scientist. So now the question is that is publish or perish policy towards KPI was a push factor for us to publish in the predatory journal. As you can see from one of my journal, that it is actually a factor. One of the 5 factors is the publish or perish policy. But this publish or perish policy is used to decide a KPI, and that KPI was given by the ministry to the institution, each university, and from the university they distribute it among the faculties, and from the faculties it goes to individual researcher or faculty members. And what happens is that these individuals are actually under pressure to publish more and more paper so that we can meet our own KPI. It actually can satisfy the KPI of the faculty, and eventually it can satisfy the KPI of the institutions given by the ministry and the government.
Sorry, Prof. We have another 5 more minutes here, Prof.
Sure, I'll be finishing soon. So now, the important thing is that KPI is a double-edged sword. That in one hand we need it, on the other hand, it actually help us or push us to publish in the predatory journals. So how to escape it? How to escape from these predatory journals? To me, if you follow my discussion, to conduct a responsible research and so on, or to avoid any form of misconduct, these are the way to do it. But there is no, magical way. There is no, overnight we cannot get out of this, trap of these predatory journals. And this is how we are living. We are living in a world that we shall continue to have predatory journals with us. And at the same time, whether it is me or you, someone else somewhere in the world will continue publishing in those journals. So the easiest way to do that is that, if we conduct the responsible research, which will fulfill all those attributes, and at the same time, it will make a balance between the quality and the number. If we make a balance between the quality and number, instead of running behind the number, it may help us to conduct a responsible research, and it may help us not to be trapped by those journals. Now, there are some few practical measures that you can do. Number one is that you can check existence of a particular journal in the Publons, in Scopus, but nowadays you have to be careful because of the recent outcome. And you can also check the existence of those journals in the directory of open access journals, DOAJ. You can also go to this particular website, which gives a very interesting mechanism to think, check, and submit your paper to a particular journal. They will help you to identify the right journal in the right field, and then you can submit it. The third effective way to identify whether the journal is a predatory journal or not is to check the editorial teams. All right, you can see the editorial team, and then you can actually go to the personal website of those editors, try to look at it. If you see that they belong to some prestigious institutes, or they have their own scientific track records, you can trust them. Otherwise, try to consider that they may fall into the predatory journals. And the fourth possible way is that you can look at their archives. All right. Most of the predatory journals, you can see that they will have their volume number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. All right. They are very new, but some of them, they can be old. So you can go to their archives and you can look at you can search some of the papers from your own field, and then you look at the corresponding author who are publishing there. Is he or she coming from a prestigious institute or not? This is a very, very practical way to identify if this is a good journal or not. Now, there are other ways to conduct, as I said, that conduct responsible research, which may help you to escape those journals. And 4 of them I must highlight. Number 1 is that, try to avoid plagiarism, and try to avoid cooking results, fabrication and manipulation results. And number 3 is that, try to assign authorship, rightly, in an ethical manner. At the same time, this is a very important issue for the organizations or institutions to count the contributions based on the actual contribution, not just by counting the number of papers. And to do those 2 things, for example, to assign somebody or give somebody the right credit as author, you can basically follow or try to understand this tool that we have developed, which we call as relative intellectual contribution. And also we have developed another index, which is called T-index. These 2 indexes were published in this paper in Scientometrics in 2017. And if any organization or institution, they want to screen out who are the major contributors, rather than focusing on the total number of papers published by their researchers or staff, they can actually use this particular tool, what we call them as an Author Performance Index, or API. And this tool was recently published in a journal, is Accountability Research. So these tools also may help you to conduct a responsible research for future. You may be, some of you maybe would be interested to look at this editorial. I took the privilege to publish this editorial in the journal that I am now running with the Faculty of Dentistry, University Malaya. You may also submit your paper to this journal. I can guarantee that this journal is not a predatory journal. We do not ask for money, and we surely go for a very precise review process. With that note, I would like to conclude and thank you very much for your attention. And I would like you to have any comments or remarks if you have any.